What is the first country that comes to mind when it comes to left-hand traffic? Of course, Great Britain. But what if we told you that apart from the British, more than 70 countries around the world drive this way? In this episode of Behold More, we will explore where this rule came from, why it still exists, and whether there is a chance that one day the whole world will switch to one side of the road. Like and subscribe, and let's get started. Origins. Why on the left? Most of us don't even think about why we drive on one side of the road or the other. The answer lies in the distant past. Imagine a medieval knight on horseback. He held his sword in his right hand, and so it made sense to ride on the left side of the road. That way he could instantly defend himself against an enemy riding towards him. It was also safer to jump off the horse on the left side, onto the shoulder rather than into the thick of traffic. Interestingly, even peasants with carts drove the same way. Most of them were right-handed. It was more convenient to hold the whip in their right hand and control the horses while sitting on the left side of the cart if other oncoming drivers also drove on the left. Historians have even found evidence that in ancient Rome, cart drivers kept to the left. In Pompeii, wheel ruts have been preserved on the stone roads, showing that the main traffic flow was on the left. In other words, left-hand traffic is not a British invention, but an ancient European tradition that has existed for centuries. But if the left side is so historic, why did most of the world end up driving on the right? From class division to Napoleon, the emergence of right-hand traffic. In medieval Europe, roads were narrow and unmarked. The wealthy rode on the left. It was more convenient to hold a sword in the right hand to fend off enemies. Poorer people had to huddle on the right so as not to interfere with the elite. But then came the French Revolution of 1789. The aristocracy was overthrown and their privileges abolished. It became dangerous to drive on the left, so the rich began to drive on the right, mingling with the people so as not to attract attention. Eventually, the Parisian keep to the right was officially established, with Napoleon playing a key role. He was left-handed and ordered his troops to move on the right. This had a double meaning. It was convenient for him personally, and symbolic. We are a new force, not the knights of old Europe. By the 19th century, most of Europe was already driving on the right. But Great Britain did not comply. For her, it was a matter of principle, to stick to traditions and show independence from the continent. And with Britain came its entire colonial empire. India, Australia, South Africa. It was the colonies that saved left-hand traffic from extinction. But it wasn't just wars that shaped the habit. Progress in the transport industry also had a strong influence. America and wagons. Why the US is definitely on the right. In the US, the choice of the right side was seriously influenced by a practical factor: Conestoga wagons at the end of the 18th century. The drivers sat on the left, whip in their right hand, so it was more logical for them to stay on the right side. Better visibility of the oncoming lane. As early as 1792, Pennsylvania established right-hand traffic on its famous toll road, Lancaster, Philadelphia. In 1804, New York was the first in the U.S. to extend the rule to all state roads, and it soon became the norm throughout the country. But the trend was finally cemented by a new player, the automobile. Left-hand drive. How cars pushed half the world to drive on the right. Early cars often imitated horse-drawn carriages, with the steering wheel frequently on the right. But in 1908, Ford launched the Model T with the steering wheel on the left to make it easier for the driver to drop passengers off on the right side of the car and to see the center of the road better. It turned out to be safer too. You sit closer to the axis of oncoming traffic. The US became a giant exporter of cars, and the world that bought American cars switched even more actively to right-hand traffic, so that everything would work out. Left-hand drive plus right-hand side. But if part of the world confidently moved to the right, why did the rest stay on the left? Present. 76 countries on the left. If you look at the map, today about 76 countries and territories adhere to left-hand traffic. These are Australia, India, Pakistan, Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, South Africa, Cyprus, Ireland, New Zealand, and many others. Together, they make up about 35% of the world's population. That means 1 in 3 people live in a country where they drive differently from the majority. But among them is one country that was never under British rule. And yet it chose the left side. That country is Japan. Why does Japan drive on the left? In the 19th century, Japan opened its ports after centuries of isolation. The country modernized rapidly and invited engineers from the West. The British built the railways. They also decided that trains should run on the left. When the first cars appeared in Japan, the authorities decided to simply copy the rules from the railways. Over time, this became the norm. Today, even transport interchanges are built to mirror those in Europe. This is an example of how the fate of a country can be decided not by conquest, but by a simple engineering standard. However, history knows exceptions. H in Sweden, 1967. In Sweden, drivers drove on the left, while in neighboring Denmark, Norway, and Finland, they drove on the right. This created enormous problems at the border. On the night of September 2nd to 3rd, a grand operation took place, H-Day. The letter H stood for Högertrafik, meaning right-hand traffic. Millions of people woke up in a country that drove differently. All signs, traffic lights, and road markings were replaced overnight. Tens of thousands of police officers and volunteers were stationed on the roads to prevent chaos. And surprisingly, the very next day, there were fewer accidents. This was because drivers were extremely careful. But not all countries were able to replicate this experience. Iceland, for example, also made the switch, but only after several years. Most others stuck with what they had. So the history of Sweden and even Iceland proves that it is technically possible. Why don't others follow suit? Others? Why not switch to a single system? It would be logical to standardize traffic rules around the world. After all, it would make traveling easier for drivers. But in practice, the transition would cost a fortune. All signs, traffic lights, bus stops, and road markings would have to be changed, and interchanges and bridges would have to be rebuilt. And most importantly, millions of cars would have to be modified. After all, in left-hand countries, the steering wheel is on the right, and in right-hand countries, it is on the left. All of this would involve enormous costs. Therefore, most countries do not even consider this option. However, when borders bring together the left and right worlds, engineers come up with sophisticated solutions, where left-hand and right-hand traffic converge. Switch bridges. For example, between Macau, left-hand traffic, and mainland China, right-hand traffic, interchange switches are being designed to safely switch traffic flows from one side to the other. In Scandinavia, the issue was resolved differently. When Sweden switched from left-hand to right-hand traffic in 1967, the borders with Norway and Finland became checkpoints where traffic was switched before entering the neighboring country. In other words, drivers actually crossed a small controlled section, which gave them time and space to switch to the other side. Thailand often solves the issue at its borders with right-hand drive neighbors simply with traffic lights. Such junctions are like visible seams on a global road where different traditions meet. And although logistics teaches us that transition is possible, cultural inertia proves that it is not always necessary. Left-hand traffic is not a British whim. It is a tradition that dates back to the ancient Romans and medieval knights, gained momentum during the Napoleonic era, and has been preserved due to historical circumstances. Today, more than 70 countries and territories drive on the left, while most of the world drives on the right. Unification looks good in theory, but in practice it is too expensive and offers little benefit. So next time you hear about left-hand traffic, remember, it's not just Britain. It's a 1,000-year-old tradition that has survived into the 21st century and affects the lives of millions of people every day. It's a mark of history on the asphalt, economics, and engineering that has shaped our roads. This has been the Behold More channel. Like and comment. Would you support the idea of making the world drive on the same side of the road? Because who knows, maybe in 100 years we'll all be driving on the same side again. And don't forget to subscribe because there's more here than you knew.